us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. That will take us to item number 2 on tonight's agenda, approval of the January 12th, 2016 minutes and the January 18th, 2016 minutes. Why don't we take them one at a time? Is there a motion to accept the January 12th minutes? Made by Mr. Powell, seconded by Mr. Schneider. Any corrections? Mr. Powell.
On page 4, lines 183, 84, 85, according to legal counsel, the term refers to the legislative body, open quotes, town council. That it's not town council. What we were referring to was town meeting. So do we want to call it the legislative body and leave town council out? Just strike it? Do you think that would be clear enough?
Well, we definitely need to strike town council.
Right. But what I'm saying, would everyone understand if it stays as is except for town council, would everyone understand what that means?
Vice Chair Barnes.
Could I suggest we use the term voters? Because that is really who the legislative body is.
Works for me.
Yeah, I like that. So we'll replace it with the voters.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Any other corrections? Ms. Guglielmi.
On page 5, line number 230, it says Board Member Guglielmi suggested a 2-step process that would bring the total to $150,000. I suggested considering something like and expressed some concern over an amount like $100,000 on the ballot.
Okay. So how would you like that to read?
Board Member Guglielmi suggested considering a 2-step process that would bring the total to $150,000. She also expressed concern over a warrant article for $100,000 on the ballot this year.
Thank you. Any other corrections? Okay. Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the January 12th, 2016 minutes as amended, say aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. How does the student rep vote?
In favor.
Thank you, sir. And so is there a motion to accept January 18th minutes made by Vice Chair Barnes, seconded by Mr. Schneider? Any corrections? Vice Chair Barnes.
We'll start on page 2, line 64. And it's Mr. Rothhaus is the town council, CONCIL representative for Merrimack Safeguard. So it should be is the town council representative because there's just one, and representative for Merrimack Safeguard. I think that flows better. And then we're going to go to line 87, and there's a few. So it'll be high school resource officer, detective Mike Murray, so we're going to add detective. Retired Merrimack Middle School principal, Deb Wolfline. High school principal, and from Merrimack High School, principal Ken Johnson, assistant principal Peter Bergeron, and assistant principal Rich Zampieri. And acknowledge assistant superintendent McLaughlin. So, on to page 3. Line 123, I believe the amount was not 25%, but 21% of Merrimack youth, because I believe we referenced 1 and 5.
Which line are you?
I'm at 123. I remember hearing 120. It was 21, correct?
They said 25 here, and then when I followed up on it, they changed it to 21.
So it is 21, so let's make sure it's accurate in our minutes.
But no, but to
they
Jake's
did mention
point
it, yep.
here, right.
So,
Ms. Guglielmi.
Would it help to put later stated as 21% or something like that?
It
Later
does.
corrected as
It does.
21%. I would even say corrected as.
It says it later on.
But I just don't want people to think we're referencing the same number. So we want to make sure the accurate one is stated. So however we feel is more appropriate.
I like this suggestion. It's fully explicit.
So, but we just want to make sure 25 isn't put out there as fact because it's not. It was an error in verbalizing, which was corrected later, as we said. Page 5, line 220. And pros and cons are not apostrophe; they're not possessive. Or trying to hyphenate to the word is, so that's not it. Page 7, line 297. And it's school administration is singular. And then page 10, line 445. And Vice Chair Barnes, I got my own name wrong, oh my goodness. Vice Chair Barnes closed the discussion with the praise of the school's staff. We didn't do it, so I'll give us credit for what we didn't do. And that is all I have.
Excellent. I saw some other hands up. Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, on page 13, the very top, line 588, on March 2nd, 2016, the SAT will be administered statewide. I think we want to say the English and math portion will be paid for by the state in the writing portion, because remember there's English and math, and then there's the writing that's the piece that's covered by the grant. So make sure we put both in there.
Thank you. Is that it? Ms. Guglielmi.
Page 5, line number 213. Board Member Guglielmi asked, and I'd like to correct it to state, asked what we do in Merrimack regarding the drug awareness and at what age we begin. I was asking Dr. McLaughlin for some background regarding our curriculum as it relates to drug awareness.
Great. All set. Mr. Marcus.
On page 4, line 159, we changed that to by stating that the drug issue is not only a school problem.
Good catch. Yep. Excellent. Is that it? All set? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Vice Chair Barnes.
I forgot my cheat sheet, page 13. So page 13, line 603, it should read a number of emails on this issue of bringing the drug sniffing dog. And that is all I have, I promise.
All right. Going once, going twice. Seeing none. All those in favor of accepting the January 18th, 2016 minutes as amended signify by saying aye. Opposed? Abstentions? 1. The motion carries 401 with the chair abstaining. And what is the student rep's opinion?
In favor.
Thank you, sir. And that will take us to item number 3 on the agenda, public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board. All we ask is that you come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Does anyone look to address the board under public participation? Seeing none, we'll close public participation and move to item 4, acceptance of gifts or grants under $5,000. Business Administrator Chevenel.
Thank you very much. This evening we have a gift from Connor McBride. Those of you who were here a few years ago may recall that Mr. McBride did as an Eagle Scout project a bridge, a nature trail over at Reed's Ferry School. There are funds left in the account, and after consultation with him, he decided to donate the balance to Reed's Ferry School for future school beautification and maintenance projects. So, from Mr. McBride.
It's wonderful. Doubly generous. Is there a motion? Mr. Powell.
I move that we accept the gift from Mr. McBride with our sincere thanks.
And a second, made by Ms. Guagliumi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, none. Motion carries 5-0-0. And the student rep's opinion.
In favor.
Thank you, sir. And that will take us to item number 5, Parent Involvement Survey Results for 2014-2015. I will invite to the table our Director of Special Education, Mr. John Fabrizio. And from the Parent Support Group, I would invite Ms. Barbara Publicover, Ms. Trish Swanger, and Ms. Michelle Watson. Welcome back, all.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here again tonight. This will be the fourth year I've had the honor to present our parent involvement survey with Michelle, Trish, and Barb, who've been by my side through this process. And I put a little PowerPoint together tonight just to kind of keep us on track. It's not very detailed, but it's more of just a guide for a lot of information that comes out of the survey. So as you see tonight, we'll overview the involvement survey in special ed. We'll talk about New Hampshire statewide results. We'll talk about the Merrimack School District survey response rate, understanding the changes that were made in 14-15, well, in 13-14 actually, that also affect 14-15, and then types of questions that were asked to parents, and then kind of next steps for our group and our new membership and partnerships we're trying to develop. So that's kind of what those. So I'll start off. We're kind of talking about the parent involvement survey. And to be very simplistic, there's a lot of words up there, but to be simplistic, it's the state's required to measure a percentage of parents and children who receive special education who report that the schools facilitate parent involvement as a means to improve services for students with disabilities. New Hampshire uses the Parent Involvement Survey in special ed to measure this. Gibson Consultant Group is the vendor that they've chosen to help they've contracted with to help administer the survey each year. So in 2014-15 marked the 8th year New Hampshire has conducted the Parent Involvement Survey. The survey measures the percentage of parents with children receiving special education service who report that schools facilitate parent involvement as a means to improve special education services as a result. In 2015, New Hampshire began conducting a census survey over 2 years versus the 1 year. They've divided districts into two blocks, Block A and Block B. Block A, which Merrimack is involved with, was distributed in 2014-15, and we'll report those results tonight. The response rate for preschool students and combined in Block A was 17%. Additionally, 35% of families receiving special education for school-age students reported in Block A. So what are some of our state results? Statewide. So over 2,395 responses were received, 290 of them on the preschool instrument and 2,069 on the school-age instrument. These represent 70% response rate for Block A districts. It is a decrease of basically 2 points from the prior year, along with the state. Parents provided information to us on and characteristics of the students. According to the response, students who had parents' response in the survey were mostly representative of New Hampshire itself. And that there was, in 2014-15, they were comparable to the survey of the previous year. You'll see the average scale scored across the state was 560, and we'll talk about scale scores in a minute, and compared to 561 in 2013-14. At the preschool level, it was higher, about 609 compared to 552, so a little increase there. Across the state, 35.4% of parents met or exceeded the scale score of 600. It's indicated that we believe the districts are and this is a belief that they're facilitating parent involvement as a means of improving services for all their students. So overall, total was 1.5% points lower in 2013-14. Overall, a total comparison of 47.6 of the parents and preschool students scoring at above 600, and that increased by 4.4%. So as you see, that the survey, not incredibly different. I think that across the state, it was, although they went to Block A and Block B, I think Trish will talk a little more about the statistical pieces behind that, but there's no real significant huge difference in what it is. It's still representative of this scale. It's a good measure of kind of how Merrimack is doing, what things we are doing very well in communicating out to our community and taking responses back and feedback, and what things there's still some areas of improvement, and it shows us where and how, and we'll talk about next steps later in our presentation about how we're hoping to get to that. So district response. Sorry. It's coming. It's got a delay for some reason. Oh. That good? Or you want the last one?
No, I'll take the last one.
There we go.
Okay, great. I'm going to assume that you all have this in your packets. So I'm just going to go over it. We went over this same format last year, but just, kind of give you some comparisons and stuff. If you're going from left to right, this is the first time we're going to have a comparison of scaled scores, because prior to this, that we were in percentages. It was a little bit more difficult to compare. But 2013, 14, and now 14, 15 actually gives us that comparison, and it will continue on this way until the federal government changes the reporting requirements. As you can see, in 2014-15, we had 52 preschool surveys sent out, of which 16 got returned for a 30% rate. That is down 16% from last year. Our school age, we had 637 sent out, and we had 134 returned for a 21% return rate. That, again, down 14%. As a district, that just averages out to about 15%. It's an atypical year for us. I think you know over the many years we've had some pretty high results. But when you still compare us to the state average of 17, which actually went down from 19% down to 17%, we're still getting some very good results. We're still getting some good information. Certainly, we always want more, and as Michelle will talk about later, we're going to outreach in other ways to hopefully get more information. What's interesting is, or at least one of the things I found interesting, was of the 150 people that did fill out the survey, there's a new question on the survey that asks whether or not they filled it out last year. And that's something that was important. Special directors wanted to know some of that information, and the state wanted to know some of that information. And 95 people of the 150 did fill it out last year. So that's a pretty good sign that people are giving us good information. We had new people responding, and hopefully we're going to continue to get, and when I say new, just other parents who haven't done it before. So, we're really hoping, again, that we're going to have some more outreach on that behalf. If you look at the school age, well, I'm going to take you over to the far right-hand column, which is the NICSEAM standard, and that's that 600 standard that John talked about, that is that cutoff, that threshold that says our family's feeling like, things are being facilitated and for their involvement. You can see, yes, the preschool went down, but when you look at the school age, that has virtually stayed the same. It was 37.4% last year, and it's 37.3%. So yes, even though our numbers did go down as far as how many people actually filled out the survey, the rate of which people are feeling that the school facilitated parent involvement is still running, virtually the same. And again, that's over what the state average is, and you know, we feel pretty good about that. I think one of the things that, you know, when we look at this, you know, I can't honestly, I think most of us could tell you, we're not honestly sure why those numbers went down, but, you know, we know that 150 parents told us something, and we're going to use that information along with whatever else we can get. When Michelle kind of talks about her piece of the puzzle, and I think we're just going to continue to move on and do all the things that we've always done and more. So I don't know if John or Michelle or Tricia have any other comments on the survey results. If you went, I don't know if you, John, you wanted to go on to the next couple of slides. This one is just about survey completion and about whether or not people were filling it out online, and we are still up higher than what the state average is for people who are filling it online. So that may be something that we continue to look at on ways we can maximize that in whatever format we can, which still honors the fact that we have to have, these are anonymous. So, and next.
Superintendent.
Oh, can I just say that when we met together as a group, which we do monthly, one of the things that we thought might be a factor is survey fatigue, because we've been doing this year to year to year, and that caused us to say that we think that we need to do a better job of telling our respondents how important the information is and exactly how we use it. So in other words, if we come up with some solutions for what we want to do or some activities, we want the respondents to realize that off of what we learned from you, this is what we're doing. And a lot of times people fill out surveys, but they don't know to what end was it done. And that was one of our deliberations. So we just are spending as much time looking at the respondents and whether they, you know, give us back information or not, which I think is another part of analysis.
This slide is just what we've talked about before as far as who filled it out last year. And when you look at, you know, the percentages and stuff. And that's how we came up with, I told you, 95 of the 150. Delayed reaction.
Okay, before I even get to my review for you, I'm just going to add on a few points. I should push the button. So now I'll add a few points from Barb's. Just a couple of points to keep in mind when you're looking at the scores for this year. The first one is, while Merrimack in general over the year, our history has been to have a much greater response rate than we have this year. For statistical purposes, a response rate between 15 and 17% is statistically valid. That means if your response rate is above 15 or 16%, the information you're getting should be pretty accurate. The fact that we've been beyond that is great, but to be lower does not make it any less valid information. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. The second was survey fatigue. And survey fatigue is something that we spoke about not only in our meetings here, but something that the statewide committee has been discussing for quite some time, because it is a known phenomenon. So it's not just happening in Merrimack, it happens other places. But again, you will see a greater difference in Merrimack because we started with such a much higher response rate to begin with. So the drop is going to be more precipitous, and that's what you're seeing. There are things that you can do to combat that. One of the things that the state is doing to try and help combat that is to have the 2-year period where we're doing one cohort and then another cohort, so that there's a break and it's not year after year. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is that you notice a larger difference between last year and this year in the preschool numbers. One of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at the numbers for preschool versus the numbers for school age is the fact that the preschool cohort is much smaller. And so any numerical change in that cohort is going to have a larger impact. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it was that much worse. It just means it's that much smaller. And I'm not going to bore you with the rest of the numbers, but John can tell you that I did do some numerical comparisons with the proportionality between last year's survey, this year's survey, and the size of the cohorts. And it is actually not quite as dramatic as the raw data would indicate. You need to look at the proportionality. So, now that we've gotten that out of the way, scaled scores. So, first we're going to do a quick review from last year, because as you remember, I sat here last year and we talked about scaled scores. Okay. So, when the survey first began, results were reported for each question as a percent of respondents in agreement with that particular question. This was the first step in deciphering the data. Percentages basically are more familiar for people, and it was a good starting point for everyone. If you're trying to do something statewide, you want to start with something that people can kind of get their minds around. So we used that for a number of years. Everyone got familiar with the process of the survey taking, the reporting, and all of that. However, I can tell you definitively, because I've been on this committee since its inception, it was always intended to advance to scaled scores. The survey itself was designed to be reported this way. And so we are moving in the direction that we should be moving in. Okay. Now, last year, I talked to you about the transition between the percentage scoring and the scaled score. And we did a whole comparison so that you could see the relationship between moving from the percentage score to the scaled score, and that they actually did follow the same pattern. Good.
You did scale scores for dummies for us.
Yeah, good. And you remembered the lesson.
I remember.
Oh, excellent. So we saw that correlation. This year, the data that we're giving you is completely transitioned to scaled reporting. Okay? What you're going to be seeing above you is the brief explanation of this scaled score. I'm not going to read the technical jargon explanation. I'm just going to tell you. So, and again, you remember this from last year. So what does this tell us? This tells us basically that an item's placement on the scale indicates its level of difficulty. So each thing has a placement, and that's its difficulty. The level of a district's scaled score indicates level of mastery. And that's basically what all of that's telling you. And 600 is the point that we're shooting for. So as you move up the scale, it's more difficult to attain agreement, and those items are, generally speaking, more complex to attain. So I'm sure you remember last year I related this to, karate classes, or when you learn mathematics, you need to learn the basics first, and then you build on those skills to attain more complex skills. So that's where we are. You have to be able to float before you can do the butterfly, and you have to be able to add and subtract before you can even attempt calculus. So that's where we are. Now, given all that, does anyone have any questions specifically on scaled scoring? Excellent. Now, I want to set you up for the next section. So, John's going to go through the slides with you that are coming up, and I want you to keep these things in mind as you're looking at these slides. So, the first thing is, the easier questions are basically more yes, no, and concrete, and they usually relate directly to the formation of an IEP plan. They're the base. The secondary level questions open up more of a continuing two-way dialogue dealing with, for the most part, IEP implementation. The tertiary, or the highest level questions, deal more with integration of learning and communication in all areas for all parties involved, and it expands the parties involved. So, what we know is, in moving to the scaled scoring method, rather than focusing on a percent score for individual questions, what we now have before us is a more holistic and relational picture of where we are as a state and where we are as a district. And that gives us a better base to move forward toward the goals that we want. And that's scaled scoring. Take it away, John.
Thank you very much. So, after talking to Trish when we developed our PowerPoint, interesting, she said, John, I had this the opposite way, and I had most difficult questions first. And she said, well, John, if we're going to build it and we're going to go upstream, like we talked about, start lower first and go higher, and it will paint that picture a little more. So as you see on here, I'm not going to read them all, but example 504. You know, if you look at it, it says people from the preschool special education ensures that I have a fully understood the rights related to preschool special education. That's very concrete. It's something that we can do. It's in a book. It's solid. Yes, that's a lower level difficulty thing. We can do that. As we go up, a medium level question may be people from the preschool special education give me information about the approaches they use to help my child learn. Little more, not as concrete. Approach-wise, multiple approaches may be harder to create mastery on. Then higher, more difficult. People from the preschool special education offer supports for parents to participate in trainings and workshops. Multiple ways of being disabled, multiple possible workshops, multiple ways to hit that one. We can offer a training, but however, if your child did not have that disability, that was not a training for your child. Harder to reach and to hit that target. So lower level questions on the school age survey. I am comfortable asking questions and expressing concerns to the staff at school. I like that one. It's lower level, but I'm comfortable asking, and that's important to us. But it is a lower level thing to do. It doesn't say I'm comfortable receiving a good answer. It says I'm comfortable asking the question. We are just slow today. I don't know. Come on. Sorry about that. Medium level question. My child, school gives me enough information to know whether or not my child is making adequate progress. Medium level. Progress. Multiple ways of assessing progress, multiple ways of showing that. Multiple disabilities, that factor of hitting that every time, more difficult question, but doable. Then we get into higher level questions. So, the school explains what options parents have if they disagree with the decision of the school. It's higher level, multiple options again. That is something that's in their parent rights, but did we explain it? That's the question. Was it just something we handed out? Yes, a copy of your parent rights, but did we explain their options? And we can do better at that. It's a 600 level question. We can do better at that. So, what does this all mean? Those are high level questions. The $1 million question is, how did Merrimack do? And that's kind of what the question we all get to when we look at a survey. And before I get into this, we had an interesting conversation that I was referred to in the back room when we walked in. We were talking about these results. And what's interesting is, although we fell at a certain mark, all these questions are important. All these questions have values. All these questions are something that we should strive to always reach perfection at. It's a nice measure to how do you involve parents? How do you work with parents? How does parents support you? How do you support them, that partnership? All these questions lead to it. So although that line falls somewhere, it's nice to look at and see it. However, there's work still to do on all these questions all the time. Just because you've scored a perfect score on one of the lower level questions, it does not mean you continue to stop doing that. And I think that's important to point out too as we move forward. So let's look at Merrimack here. So, again, we talked about our numbers, how many respondents, and this is our preschool results. And we fell this year about 552, where last year we fell at a 594. It's lower. Do I know why it's lower? I would hope because I'd like to say statistically because less people responded, and if more people responded, they would have more to say, and there would have been more higher scores. However, Tricia's nodding her head at me, saying statistically that's not possible, so that was my first shot at it. I think what it is I think that, as I said, we always have to work at this. And one wrong response out of 17 could lead us down that scale. And we have to continue to look at that and say, what can we do? So what were some of the questions? And I just tabbed a few to look at it. Some things that were positive. People from the preschool special education community met with me regarding my child's progress on the IEP. And I understood that very well. We were strong. We were solid there. However, when we got up to people from the preschool special education provide me with strategies to deal with my child's behavior at home. Maybe not so much. Maybe there's more we can do there. Maybe there's more parent workshops we can do, more opportunity to reach out to parents, more resources online, more things, to get out to them on multiple modes of communication to help them with that. And it's possible to do that. Or people from the preschool special education provide me with information on how to get other services, childcare, parent support, respite, regular preschool program, WIC, food stamps, and others. Again, have we clarified our role enough that that's the role of our IEP team to go beyond the school building and offer those services out? Have we had enough communication to our educators in the district that is something we need to do? This survey helps us get there and have that conversation around the table to say, are we doing these things? And maybe we're not. Maybe we're focused on the learning and what's happening in front of us in the school and not beyond that. So it opens questions for us to go out and reach and look for more answers. On the school age survey. Oh, goodness, I'm sorry. So our line this year, 554, is our line where we are. Last year's medium score was 565. Again, slight decrease. Not much. It's one or two questions on the survey. One question on the survey, but it's one significant question because it says it's a drop, and we never want to drop. But as you see where our blue and red line on the copies that I gave you fall, it's significantly high. And comparatively across the state, that's a nice high level for our school things. So that's good. That is good. However, do we still have to make sure that my child's school gives me enough information to know whether or not my child is making adequate progress? Do we have to do that still? Yes, we do, because that fell below the line on the school age, but it fell above the line in the preschool. So as a district, are we doing that adequately enough? We have more work to do, even on the school age survey. Then we get into, does the school give me choices regarding services that address my child's needs? Interesting question. Choices. What's that mean? Does it mean that choices in placement, choices in program? What do choices mean? So I think that's an interesting question to dig into about. What choices are we giving? Are we giving options, or are we going and saying, here's the best option? And it's a question, do we create partnerships by giving choices? And the answer is yes to that. So are we creating partnerships and doing that and hearing the parent's voice as well as the school's voice in those pieces? And we have to make sure that we're cognizant of that when we do that in all meetings. So that was it. Anything else that they'd like to point out on the survey? No? Any questions about the survey itself before we move on to the next steps?
Ms. Gualiumi.
It's about, I just had a couple questions.
Sure.
Kind of going back to the beginning. I had a question regarding the timing of the mailing. Does it always have to be sent out during a certain period of time? So it wasn't like it was sent over the holidays and that accounted for.
It just came out actually this week. The process started for Group B. We don't have to do it this year, which is nice.
Okay.
But we don't have to do it this year, but we have time to work on it for next year to how to communicate it better. And I think some of the reason for Group A and Group B was exactly what I think you're addressing is, has there been enough communication prior to the survey? And I think with the every year survey, it was kind of, you get it back, you report on it, you get it out, you get it back, you report on it, in that vicious cycle of keep doing that. Now, Group B is going out right now as we speak. It's starting that process. And we're able to take this time to communicate that out. Group B went out. However, we don't have to do that. Next year, our survey will be coming out, and spend some time knowing it's coming over that piece. But they regulate by a state memo when it goes out each year.
Now, how is it handled if you have a parent that has 2 kids receiving services? Is it a household survey that goes out, or is it one survey for each kid?
It goes out to every special ed child. So
Okay.
what it is.
All right, so if someone had 3 kids receiving services, they would receive 3 surveys. Okay. Do we know what percentage of the parents have more than one child receiving services?
Off the top of my head, no, I don't know that
Because
information.
I can see where
can get-
maybe
yeah.
they would fill out one and say, okay, well, I just filled it out,
Mhm.
and not filled them all out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Vice
And-
Chair Barnes.
I actually had that same question on mine, Cinda. And I guess the question on that, and I had another question that's related, and I'll follow up with that, is do you have the ability to track if there is a family that has multiple special education students in their household, how many of those came back? So if the Joneses have 3 kids, did
Yep,
they send
go ahead.
3 back? Or is it that anonymous you can't track it?
Exactly.
Okay. And so the same question I had was regarding students with parents with separate households. So if one student can have 2 surveys because mom's house and dad's house each get a survey because they're both signable. And so you wouldn't be able to track if, the parents talk and I'll cover the survey and you don't have to do it type thing, if that could be causing some response issues. But you'll never know, is what I'm hearing. The other question I had was Group B is getting sent this year. Obviously, based on things like students coming in the district, moving into the district, maybe even with, at school age levels, would they all automatically be put in the Group B so that you would get a survey out to them if it's their first year having an IEP, or if a student's just identified but have been in our system?
We are Group A. Will always be Group A as
Okay.
long as they do until Barb mentioned, until they change the federal regulation. We'll be Group A. They'll just get the survey next year.
Okay, so there's no backfill of any add-ons in districts.
No. The,
Okay.
the timing of the survey is by district, not by student.
Okay. And then let's see. I've got that already. And do parents of students that are in the system but 18 years or older get surveys? Excellent. Until up to 21?
Up to 21, they receive the surveys.
Excellent. And do students at 18 have their own surveying, as they would be considered an adult and therefore advocates?
Yes, the answer is yes to that. If they're 18, the survey goes to them.
Okay.
If they have custodial rights to their own
Okay.
self.
Those are my questions. Thanks.
Any other questions? I had a couple. I was actually surprised at the online response rate being as low as it was in this day and age. The fact that so many people took time to actually fill out and mail a paper survey as opposed to taking it online was surprising to me. Any observations or perhaps reasons for that? When it was offered both
I'll take
ways.
a shot at it. Observation-wise, I think that there's so many surveys right now that are done online. And I think that that's really a piece that we're experiencing right now. I mean, every store you walk into, every receipt you get, please take our survey, please take our online survey. I think that's a piece of saturation as a piece to it. The paper's mailed to them, they get their mail, it's in their hand.
Just sit
They can
and
take
fill
it
it
with
out.
them, they don't have to be in front of a computer, they can do it watching a ball game, they can do it other places. I think it's
That's
a piece
great.
of convenience, and
Yeah.
that's why the reasoning for the multiple ways of being able to take the survey has happened.
Right. And then my next question is really more of an observation. We talked about 15 or 16% being sort of the threshold for statistically relevant. And I appreciate everything that you do to increase our number. And I think even though we're down, we've got a solid number. But I imagine at the state, this is starting to become a major concern because they're at about 17% response rate, right, which is approaching that level of perhaps insignificance. But that said, for us, I'm really more interested with the approach that we take to improve on this data, right? What are we going to do with the data? Right? Taking the survey, as long as we have a statistically relevant sample, We can make inferences from it. It would be great if we had more, but what are we doing with the data? And so, as I understood the scale scores, that they're foundational. The ones at the lower end of this list are the things that are easier to accomplish and for which we've shown mastery. Is the approach to continue to do those things that are at the bottom, sort of below that waterline that's been established, and then pick one or two others as stretch goals for the coming year to kind of say, okay, these are the sorts of things that we need to reinforce? For instance, if I look at the preschool one, the line is between 550 and 553. Is the goal to continue to stress the importance of everything in the blue under the line, but perhaps pick one or two above the line and say these are important objectives for us to focus on in the coming year, right? We can't attack them all. And if, in fact, they are foundational, is the approach to build up one year over the next? How do you plan to use the data is essentially my question, rather than me leading you with how I view it.
I think you were playing. It's a great segue into Michelle's piece.
Oh, did I?
Next steps.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
Thank you for your lead-in, and that's exactly where we are. It is, I think, a point of this is an onerous task, and
Right.
the question is, where do you attack it first, and how do you go? And we've done some talking about that, and I'm going to let
And not get
Michelle
overwhelmed.
do
Right.
her
Yeah.
piece, and then we will answer some more of that question after.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect. We couldn't have timed it better. And part of that issue that we have with how do we build is the fact, and we've talked about this with you all before, is that we've, I hate to use the word aged out, but our kids have aged out. And so we've spent a lot of this year trying to figure out where we're going. We've seen our numbers in our group meetings get smaller, and we want to make sure that we can reach as many people as we can. And so we've had a lot of talks with Marge and John in our monthly meetings about how we do this. Barb had a great suggestion that some other school districts have been using, where they get representatives from each building and form like a committee, and then the committee works together, and then they go back out. So John approached school administration of each of the buildings, got some suggested names, and we now have a group of about 5 to 6 more people, and we've met twice to kind of figure out where we're going. We have evolved over the past few years. This year we did some more changes. Even before including them, we went to quarterly meetings to see if we could get more people at the meetings instead of monthly. We have a few new people. We had a great suggestion of having those support meetings more focused. So at our meeting this fall, we had 3 building coordinators, and we talked about transition. So we did from elementary to upper elementary, and all the way up. And it was a great conversation for the first hour, and then we had other discussions about where we could go and suggestions that they had of things that they wanted. But they had really, we need feedback from what the people were trying to help. So the 2 meetings that we had with our new people, most of them are younger, have younger kids, I should say.
They're
and
probably
And we're going to work with them. We're not going anywhere just yet. We're going to transition to see how they want to move forward, what they need, which would actually help these numbers. We're not in the buildings. We don't know where the issues are. So we need to make that transition. And then together, I think that's what we would do, is we would look at the survey and say, this is what we have found. What's the best way to move this forward, and what do you see as a need? Because they haven't been involved in it. So actually, I want to just quickly touch on, we did have Lynn Lyons come twice, which was fabulous. It was packed. It was a great thing. Anxiety is huge for kids, makes it huge for parents. And then we did those quarterly meetings, and we have another one coming up in March. I don't think we have a focus topic for that yet, but that will go out. We have Facebook page. which we've been putting a lot of information out, and we have a good number of likes on it. I know most of you are on it too. So that's it.
And I think, Chris, to address your question, our focus group's going to start, our next meeting, we're going to talk about this actually, about where do we hit and what seems to be questions they have. And what's nice is this is a group of preschool, kindergarten age parents coming in. It's a great way of using the knowledge and the amount of years and the almost 20 years that this group has been together, putting their input in and hearing it and hearing the newer input and be able to balance that and move that forward. I think that to answer your question about are all those questions important? Yes. Do we need to focus on some of them and say, let's dig down and look at them. And how do we communicate? The biggest piece for all of this is a conversation we started around this table a few years ago. Communication is different now. The methods of sending a letter, the methods of that we've traditionally done aren't reaching as many families. Coming to meetings, having events at night. When you bring Lynn Lyons in, yeah, that's great. She's a national speaker, huge. That's going to get the nights. When you do your monthly meetings, it's harder to get parents to come out. So we've gone to Facebook. We've gone to online videos. We've gone to things trying to offer resources that are webinars, things like that. We're trying to use technology to help kind of push it out there and try to communicate faster, more efficiently, and more often.
John, if I could pick up off of that. What we're trying to do in Merrimack and what other districts are trying to do around the state is partnerships are just that. It's the families and it's the schools working together. And we can bring information to staff that staff can learn from, and staff can bring information to us that we can learn from. And, Michelle is absolutely right. I mean, we're not in the schools anymore. We are not on the ground level. And we really have to have that. John needs to have that. Parents need to have that. And these kind of partnerships really begin to give that back and forth, that flow of this works for me or this doesn't work for me, or this is a key area we're working on as a school. Here's how it applies to all of you. And it's really, really key. So these kinds of sort of outreach groups or focus groups or whatever you want, that's really how those inroads are being made now. And not that our model wasn't great and may still continue to be great in some capacity, but as John said, the world is changing, and it really, we need to change with it. And I think this kind of a model is what's going to help the whole district.
I just wanted to touch back on your question about were we going to look at a specific question to deal with. And the answer to that is I want you to put that thought out of your mind, because that's not the purpose of a survey. The only thing looking at the individual question does is to direct our next line of inquiry. So we do not look at the survey and say, oh, this is where we've gone down, this is the next question, so that must be what we do. That's not the way it works, and it wouldn't be the most efficient way to get results. What this tells us is, where should you start investigating? Where do you start asking further questions of people in the preschool and all? This happened, and then only after that, then you decide on a course of action.
Understood.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for making that clarification. All I was trying to get across was, if you look at this, right, if we bring this back up, right, in terms of where we came out strong on the survey, above it there are a myriad of questions, right, and to begin a line of inquiry across all of those would be extremely difficult to do, right? But picking the ones that are sort of lower on that list to begin to ask questions of the support group and the extended community to understand how we could do those better, so that staff, whether someone's involved in the support group, has participated in a focus group or not, their child will benefit from the input of the group as a whole. You guys are invaluable to the special ed team, but ultimately it's going to be the special ed team that's going to need to keep this as their focus and continue to deliver upon it, right? So it was really, that was my question. How do you look at the survey results and not get overwhelmed, right? How do you methodically sort of take this and begin inquiry and find a better way of perhaps doing some things? That's exactly what I was asking. So thank you. Any other questions?
Chris, I just want to make a comment.
Sure.
I just want to acknowledge the new people who have come forward and said that they would be a part of it. I know we're going to continue to reach out and see if other parents from other buildings. This is not unusual to just only have a couple of buildings represented, and then it builds from there. But I just want to acknowledge those parents that did come forward, whether they could be here tonight or not. I mean, they are just going to be vital to this all working and moving forward in the future. So, you know, I really, as one parent to another, really want to thank them.
Thank you. And I think we want to thank them as well. You know, coming here on an annual or sometimes more than annual basis, how much we appreciate the work of this group, and in particular, the three of you who are seated here, and for your years of dedication. And I think we just touched on the importance of the group in terms of special education delivery, and it has been a concern, right? As children age out of the system, how is it going to continue to be sustainable? So I would, on behalf of the board, also like to acknowledge and thank those parents who've come forward, stepped up, and volunteered to get involved and continue on with the important work that you've done. So thank you for mentioning that. Yes, Ms. Guagliumi.
And I would also say just let us know what we can do to help. If there's,
Exactly.
you know, don't be afraid to reach out, or I know you wouldn't anyways, but if there's something we can do, or if we can somehow provide additional support, please do reach out and let us know.
Thank you very much. And that will take us to not much of a change, a slight change. Item number 6, the New Hampshire Department of Education 2013-2014 Determination Report. And we have the benefit of retaining at the table Mr. John Fabrizio.
Thank you again. As we switch gears here, another report. This report, I've come annually, and this is the report to remind you all that I'm very proud to get zeros on. And as you know, this year, for another year, we have a perfect score of 0. And rather than go too much into detail, I'll just give a quick overview and then open to questions, because I think that these questions have been presented multiple years. This is part of the determination of each school. It's another federal requirement that we need to do this each year and report out on certain indicators that these guide and a lot of our operations in the Special Services Office. We have state reports that happen annually, consistently throughout the year, through all of these indicators. And part of these happen as part of our focus monitoring piece, so you'll see them in here. Part of these happen every year. So some are on an annual basis, some are multiple years. But overall, we get reported each year on how we've done. And I think we've met the requirement in all areas. So is there any questions about the state determination report?
Short and sweet. Any questions from the board? Seeing none, I would say congratulations on your score of 0 yet again. We are very happy for that. And I think Oh, Mr. Powell.
I think you got that from your training at MES with being Mr. Zero, or what was it, Captain Zero? Zero.
That was Zero the
yes.
hero.
Yes, so I'm glad that it's continuing.
Who knew? Who knew it would continue? But I think, we've said before, we have always had a great special education department. Since you've taken it over, you've continued on with the great scores that we've had, and that's not always easy to do. Transitions are tough, and so the fact that we continue to get this perfect score of 0 is a wonderful thing and a great achievement.
And I also have to take the opportunity that I know we're saying some thank yous, but I also have 8 coordinators throughout the district, counting both the 6 buildings and then Sherry Goldberg and Sheila Demers, who are my preschool and my out-of-district coordinator. And in every piece of this, you'll see multiple measures throughout here. There's a lot of indicators here and a lot of areas to do, and this means that they all need to be on the ball too, and they all need to know that their timelines and their evaluations and their transition goals and all the pieces that come into this have to be solid, and they have to adhere to me when I call and say, hey, I'm looking online and I'm reporting and we're a little overdue on this case. What's going on? And we explore those and we track those from my office. And I think that they're always responsive. They're always willing to step up and help out and work as team members. So my credit goes out to them and my 2 administrators, assistant in our office who really helped this happen.
Well, convey our congratulations and our sincere thanks to all of them tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Fabrizio. And that will take us to item number 7 on the agenda, reconsideration of the scope of the Merrimack Middle School roof project. Mr. Chevenel.
Thank you. I think sometime during our budget discussions and deliberations that I had mentioned that the roof bids are going to be open in my office last Friday at around 10 a.m., January 29th. They were opened in my office. We received around 4 bids. We do have a bid that offers us a unique opportunity. We have a bid that is approximately $260 under what's budgeted for this year. That allows us to do the entire middle school roof instead of just 3/4 of the section of it. We can do the entire roof with what is budgeted in the current proposed 16-17 budget if we choose to go that route. This is a contractor that's a national contractor. They're very big throughout the United States. They haven't broken into the state of New Hampshire yet. They have a terrific safety record and quality record. They're recommended by the manufacturer highly of the roofing material product, and they're willing to do everything during the summer of 2016. Start right after school gets out and finish up right before school begins. So we have that opportunity to do this, and I kind of put that before your consideration this evening.
Thank you. And in terms of a time frame for the decision, when would you need to respond?
I would like to, seeing that you're going to be voting on the bottom line of the budget tonight, I would prefer a decision tonight. This is all going to be, the contract's going to be contingent upon the budget passing and whatnot. And I would prefer that we address this evening.
Okay.
If not, you could look at saving, I'll give you another option, saving $296,000 if you want to do 3/4 of the roof. You could do a budget reduction if you wanted to.
So you're saying to do the section we had planned would
Yes.
be $296,000 less. Okay. All right. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. Vice Chair Barnes.
If you could just remind us, because we don't have it in front of us, what was the cost of the remaining part of the roof going to be at a later budget year?
$487,000.
And so basically, we're doing it for a difference of $286,000
Correct.
because the other bid helped us to do the math. I didn't have to do it. That's great. Now, were all three other bids around that $296,000 less ish?
No, the other bids were, we went from a range of, let's say, the bid for the entire roof was 1.139, 490. We went from a range of that to around 1.8. So it was quite the swing as far as the bids that came in.
Right. And just circling back on my first question, so it was $435,000 for the remaining 25%. And what year did we have it budgeted to do?
17, 18.
So based on that, we're being penny wise and pound foolish for us not to take that seriously. We'd be saving a ton of money. So those are my questions. Thanks.
Ms. Guglielmi.
Also, there are other advantages of just doing it all at the same time. Just the materials, any risks for structural damage, things like that. I mean, it sounds like it would be advantageous to do it all at once.
Yeah, when you have a contractor, it's always advantageous. There's such a thing called general conditions where they have to set up a job trailer, they have to set up their own water, they have to set up their own facilities, so to speak. And those are always constant no matter basically how big the job is. So that's a fixed cost, and when you do a larger job, you recoup more of that, and the more you make profits from the job. So it benefits them to just do the roof all at once as opposed to coming back and doing all those general conditions all over again and doing the staging of the area as far as the safety barricades around the outside to stop people from perhaps tripping and stumbling over the edge of the roof. So there's a lot of setup involved that they'd only have to do once as opposed to doing it twice.
Well, and it sounds like it's worth considering, seeing we ended up with a surprise with the roof, with this roof, that there's nothing to tell me that there won't be a surprise with that remaining portion of the roof as well.
There was a lot of volatility in the bids.
Yeah.
This is a contractor, like I said, some contractors come in, they're motivated, they're a big firm. They've done plenty of work nationwide, Chicago. They've done Buffalo, New York. They've done a ton of jobs across the country, in the South and the West, wherever. And they just haven't broken into New Hampshire, not for lack of, I guess just for lack of, okay, now it's time to expand our business a little bit more. So let's see if we can get some work up here. And like I said, they came highly regarded by the engineer that we have, who does the evaluations of the bids and the specifications and everything like that. So it's something to consider seriously.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Schneider.
A couple of questions. First, because this is the first time this vendor is going into New Hampshire, if we do decide to go this route, and then let's say the vendor decides that they don't want to go, I mean, certain times vendors stretch to go to a distance and they find maybe it's too far, they don't have the infrastructure, and they decided not to do business down the road, for example. Is there any risk with us with our long-term support, upkeep, repairs to the roof, should that vendor decide not to stay within this region?
Well, this vendor's going to have a performance bond, so if he defaults on that, we get the money, and we can force him to do that. So,
Right. No. I mean down the road warranty. So, like, we put the roof in. So, first of all, my understanding is the warranty is longer on this roof.
Yeah, this roof is a 40-year warranty.
Right. So let's say we hit year 15, and there's an issue with the roof. If this vendor is not doing business in our area, is it more difficult for us to get warranty repair work out of that vendor since they're not local? Should they not be in business? Do you see any risk there?
Well, this vendor currently is located in Connecticut. We've done business with vendors in Connecticut all the time in previous roofing projects. So I don't see their lack of market penetration in New Hampshire as a impediment to getting warranty work done, seeing they already have a presence on the East Coast.
Okay, because you gave us little bits and pieces of what it meant in the region. It didn't know if the region was the Northeast, just New Hampshire, just Merrimack, what the focus was.
Yeah.
Because the concern is always, because with such a long warranty, I mean, it's really good because it's a whole lot longer than the warranty on the roof that's failing on the building right now.
Plus, even if the installer were to go out of business, let's say, Garland, the manufacturer, has been around since 1895. They're a $500 million company. I don't think they're going anywhere right now.
So it's
anytime
the
soon.
warranty is really through the manufacturer of
Manufacturer, yeah,
the roof,
that's
rather
correct.
than okay.
That's why the manufacturer gets to pre-qualify the installers because they're guaranteeing their product is going to stand
Okay.
the test of time.
Okay. And then my final question is, just to make sure that I understand right and everybody else listening does, we had budgeted how much for this year?
$1,139,750.
Okay, so little over 1.1 million to do this, and then next year we had budgeted nearly $500,000 to do the
For
other
the
part.
CIP, it was like, I believe,
Right.
487.
Right. So about over 1.6 to do the whole roof, and if we do it all this year, we're getting it for essentially what our budget in the CIP was this year.
That's
to do
correct.
the whole thing, and then that frees up $500,000 out of next year's proposed CIP
Yes, sir.
if we do that. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Is anyone interested in making a motion waiving the 2-week rule? Mr. Schneider had his hand up first.
So do you want the motion
although
to waive the
tentatively?
Well, I'm trying to figure exactly what motion you want to make first. I mean, is the motion to authorize the district to take a bid for the entire roof?
I think that's the direction Matt is looking for from the board, yes.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that the board authorize the business administrator to accept the bid for the entire roof for the amount that's $280 less, I believe, than the budgeted amount. And waive the 2-week rule to allow him to accept the bid in a timely fashion.
And seconded by Mr. Powell. Do you want to speak to it?
I think it was plain enough language, so hopefully it makes sense.
Makes sense. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. And what is the student rep's opinion?
In favor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chevenel,
Thank
for
you.
the good news.
Thank you.
And that will take us to item number 8, board response to draft warrant articles on the 2016 warrant. So in front of us, in our packets, we have the draft warrant articles that have been put forward or will be put forward as part of the warrant. All have been reviewed by legal counsel. They were initially drafted by Mr. Chevenel. We can go through the warrant, and for those that actually require a school board vote, we'll get a motion and a second on the warrant article and actually vote it so that we can move this on. And then these will be taken up. The ones with money attached will be reviewed and voted on by the Budget Committee as well before going to deliberative session and ultimately to town meeting. Mr. Chevenel, do you want to take
Sure.
us through your handiwork?
Yep. Of course, the warrant starts with the preamble as to when the deliberative session's going to be scheduled. That's going to be Tuesday, March 8th at 7 p.m. At James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School. And then voting, of course, is the second Tuesday in April 12th, 2016. The first article would be just to elect all necessary school district officers. You don't have to vote on that. Article 2 is an article we have every single year. It states, shall the Merrimack School Board be authorized to accept on behalf of the district without further action by the voters gifts, legacies, and devices of personal or real property which may become available to the district during the fiscal year. We have this every year in case we get a gift of land or real property. If you didn't have this, you'd have to go before the voters in order to gain acceptance of that property. You can't accept it like the town council can. They have that authority. The school board does not. This does not include gifts of cash donations that we deal with every single, well, not every single week, but pretty much every single week. It's a generous district out there. And that is totally separate. That's an RSA that you've accepted probably a good 20 years ago. So this is just for land and whatnot, real property.
Great.
Okay.
Vice Chair Barnes.
I move that we accept Article 2 as written.
And a second? Mr. Schneider. Any discussion? All right, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, none. That carries 5-0-0. And what is the school board rep's opinion?
In favor.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
The next article we have is Article number 3. It is an agreement between the Merrimack School Board and the Merrimack Teachers Association. It reads, shall the district approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the school board and the Merrimack Teachers Association, which calls for the following net changes in salaries and benefits at the current staffing levels over the amount paid in the prior fiscal year. And let me just read the estimates. For 2016-2017, it'd be $750,000, $714. 17-18 is $742,000, $335. 2018-19 is $764, $605. Then it goes on to, and further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $750,000, $750,014.
Let me help you here.
Thank you very much.
$750,714.
Yeah, new glasses. I apologize
That's
for that.
a confusing one.
Yeah. Such sum representing the additional cost attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement over those that would be paid at the current staffing levels. In summary, for the financials, this is a 3-year contract. It averages 3% a year as far as the increase. It maintains the 85-15% contribution on the HMO portion of the health insurance plan. It does increase the budget for staff development for graduate studies by $30,000. It increases the insurance buyout from $1,500 to $3,000. Basically, we're trying to incentivize people to not take our health insurance, thus saving money. If we can do that with an increase in the incentive of $1,500 and make it $3,000, we get around 4 or 5 more people who would take that offering. That would save us some money. It's not calculated in the cost of the warrant article because it's really kind of an unknown right now, and I don't like to put unknowns in any calculation, so I'm not taking any sort of credit as far as reduction in the first year of the warrant article because of that particular feature of the agreement. It also has in it the ability for us to offer lower cost plans to the employee that they might find attractive, that may benefit the employee and the district in the future. So that's kind of the thumbnail sketch of the Merrimack Teachers Association agreement that was arrived at and I believe voted on in the affirmative today. So it's before you this evening.
Thank you. Is there a motion made by Mr. Schneider, seconded by Mr. Powell? Would you like to speak to it?
Shouldn't I say what my motion is?
Well,
Let's
yes,
do it.
please. Please. Speak to it.
I could say motion that we all go. No, whatever. I'd like to move that we accept the our warrant article number 3 as read.
I had a feeling. Okay. Would you like to speak to your motion now?
Yeah. Just like to piggyback a little bit on top of what Matt said. So, one of the things, especially around healthcare, that was really important this time is to really look at ways for to get the members of the Teachers Association to have options to pick lower cost plans for them as well as for the district. So it was very important for us this time to make sure that we had the ability to add new plans as they come along. We several of us attended healthcare summits this year and found that it wasn't so much the contribution that was the big factor with healthcare in these days, but rather the offering of some of the varied plans that they're starting to offer, such as site of service and things, which can be significant savings to the district. So for us, while we retained the 85-15 contribution level from the last year of the previous contract, we feel that the real savings for the district is going to come from the offering of a larger number of plans at lower costs. So we're real excited about that offering in there to help control our costs. So, but other than that, I think it was fair to both parties.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of moving Article 3 and voting for Article 3 on the warrant signify by saying aye. Opposed? None. Abstentions? 1. So the motion and the vote goes 4-0-1 with the chair abstaining. What is the student rep's opinion?
In favor.
Thank you, sir.
Article 4 is what we customarily call the trailer warrant article. It's has to do with the previous negotiated agreement warrant article. It just states, shall the district, if Article 3 is defeated, authorize the school board to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 3 cost items only. So if the agreement were to go down in the election, that the school board is authorized at its discretion to get the two parties together and to hammer out another agreement that would address cost items only. Perhaps come back with something, if cost was a factor in the agreement and its defeat, that would be a little more palatable to the voters, a little less cost perhaps. We have this here because it's important, because you don't have to go through Superior Court to petition them to hold a special meeting, which they do in emergencies, but sometimes are a little bit reluctant to do that because of labor agreements that don't pass. So it just assures you have that option.
Thank you. Mr. Powell.
I move that we accept Article 4 as written.
Second. Mr. Schneider. Discussion? None needed. We'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None. That carries 5-0-0. And the student rep's opinion.
In favor.
Thank you.
The next article we have, Article 5, is to add $75,000 to the school district capital repair reserve account. Currently, there's $27,000 in this fund. We've used it in the past for a few projects, and it reads, shall the district raise and appropriate an amount up to $75,000 or 10% of the unencumbered surplus remaining at the end of the fiscal year 2015-2016, whichever amount is less, and to transfer that amount to the school district repair capital reserve fund. Majority vote required. So it's, like I said, to take that amount and bring it up to around $100,000 that we would have for emergency purposes.
Great. Vice Chair Barnes.
Before I make a motion, I had a question. In our last meeting about this article, we were using the number 100,000, but there were one or two suggestions for 75,000, but now a majority request. So I guess why the downward determination for the number?
I imagine Mr. Chevenel had to put something on paper and picked one. It's up to us to decide what the warrant should actually read.
In talking in central office, we just kind of looked at it,
I guess, right,
and just kind of levelized it to $100,000 that perhaps maybe we want to just look with what's in there and just kind of even it out. it was kind of arbitrary, but it's something for you to consider. So we heard you talk about it, so instead of just going with the 100, we'd give you another option tonight.
It's well within the purview of the board to amend the warrant, and so it's out there as a suggestion. Is there a motion? Mr. Schneider.
I move that we accept the warrant article as read, Article 5.
And a second made by Mr. Powell. Would you like to speak to it?
Well, I know I was one of the ones that was promoting 75,000 as the amount to put in, but if people want to make a motion and change that number, I won't stop it by any stretch. So,
Any further discussion? Vice Chair Barnes.
I think what we were talking about that was very important in our last discussion was the potential for large-scale cost items that could come our way, and how we wouldn't be prepared to address any of it even with the 100,000. So I'm apprehensive at 75,000. Of course, I'll support the will of the board, but the consideration of the 100,000 was done for very specific reasons. I think we even talked about some of the other catastrophes that we weren't even thinking about buildings, because obviously Superstorm Sandy was one of the reasons we used it at one point for, I think it was insurance deductibles, that kind of thing. Another one was the bleachers. So, but there are some high ticket items that could fail us that we were discussing that night, even in the technology space. So for that reason, I just think we want to make sure we have one more vetting before we vote.
Thank you. Someone have their hand up? Superintendent.
I think when Matt and I finally talked, when we were making a decision about what to put before you, I think we thought that we wouldn't be finished this year, but that we would put before you the 75,000 with the hope that the voters would be so inclined, if you were inclined, and that we'd come back another year and do another 75. So you wouldn't see us stop. You'd see us go this plus this. So it was just listening to all of you talk, because some of you said 75, but then some of you talked in terms of adding over time. So we just got away from you. I think that's the determination we made together, but we did have discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Powell.
I was leaning towards the higher amount when we spoke last time, but I do see the benefits of stepping it up as we go along. I believe Ms. Gualiumi was the one who raised the issue of a more palatable number on the warrant, and I think 75 achieves that, with the understanding that we would be looking to increase this. I think it's only smart. We talked about a possible server crash. Anything, as Shannon said, could happen. I'll feel comfortable when we get that balance up a little bit more. We don't have to do it all in 1 year.
Ms. Gualiumi.
Yeah, I was more comfortable, as Mr. Powell had said. And I would have preferred to actually not put this out there until even next year if we had to, but 27,000 I think is just too low. Should we have some type of emergency? It really doesn't go very far with multiple buildings and all sorts of infrastructure. So I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
One final thought is what we heard tonight around the roof. When we were debating all the possible things that could go wrong, the other part of the middle school roof, I think, was one of the things that I was thinking about it. I don't know if it was talked about, but the fact that the whole middle school roof will be done this year, assuming we get the budget for it, and the fact that in turn frees up $500,000 next year, I think gives us the opportunity to maybe do something more meaningful in the next budget season, while putting something here to protect our interests this year. So.
Thank you. Mr. Marcus.
I hadn't considered what Mr. Schneider said, so I had wanted to state that we had discussed the 2 years of 75,000 added, because I think you originally had said 2 years, 2 consecutive years. That would have brought us up to the largest sum the reserve fund has ever had, but then we had also discussed wanting it to be even larger than that, because what was the largest? I think it was a bit higher than 150,000, right?
It was a couple hundred, I think, as I recall.
And some of the board members had wanted to raise it even higher. And Mr. Schneider is correct, though, in that the freed up money with the roof probably makes that no longer as necessary. So I had wanted to remind everyone what we talked about, but I think even with that reminder, it is moot.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Yeah, and I was one of the people who was interested in doing a little bit more because, and I look at assets like the heat wheel, which is a $400,000, $500,000 asset that's at risk for failure. So even though we've only had $200,000 perhaps in the fund in the past, if something like that were to go, we wouldn't have enough to cover it. At this point, the difference between roughly $100,000 or $125,000 puts us in at least a comfortable range. If a bleacher were to fail, like the high school bleacher did, we would be okay in order to cover that asset. But I think with a commitment to grow this over time to adequately cover the sorts of assets that we need to cover, I can certainly accept this amount. So if there's no further discussion, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 5-0-0. And Mr. Marcus?
In favor.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Warrant article number 6 is coming off of a conversation we had with the trustees of trust funds, Chris Christensen in particular, the chairman of the trustees, in regards to how we treat fees for trust funds. This article, crafted by Kathy Peel, our legal counsel, really kind of crafts what we've done in practice over the years, and it formalizes it in a warrant article to be voted on. So I'll just read it. Article 6, shall the district vote pursuant to RSA 35:9-A to authorize the trustee of trust funds to charge any contractual management expenses incurred for the management of any district capital reserve funds for which the trustees have been granted custody pursuant to RSA 35:2 against the capital reserve funds involved, rather than paying such expenses from the district general funds. Such authority shall remain in effect until rescinded by vote of the district, shall not occur within 5 years from the date of this original authorization. This article, because there is no money attached to it, there's no appropriation, only requires a vote of the school board.
Superintendent.
I would just add to Matt's reading that this was a warrant article that you've seen before, and you had some issue about it. So I want you to know that I talked to Attorney Peel again, and if you look down at the 6th line, prior to tonight, it said school district, and that was a confusing kind of thing because we had district appearing before, and then school district was put there, and so she recommended that we remove the term school, so now it's all district, and she suggested to further clarify that in the voter's guide that we just put in lay language exactly what we're asking to do. So I just wanted you to know that the legal counsel had weighed in a second time.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
There's a typo on the same line that the superintendent was just talking. It says, districts which shall not occur within 5 years should be from the date of this original, as opposed to form.
Good catch. Is there a motion? Mr. Powell.
I move that we accept Article 6 as amended.
Seconded by Vice Chair Barnes. Would you like to discuss?
I think it's great to know that we have been doing this in practice. I think it's important to codify it and say this is what we're doing. I'm hoping that a representative of the trustees will be at deliberative session to present and speak to it. So if we can reach out to them, that might not be a bad thing.
Thank you. Good suggestion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None. That carries 5-0-0. And Mr. Marcus.
In favor.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to add that all these articles have also been reviewed by the Department of Revenue Administration. So we got that done before they were presented to you tonight.
Thank you.
And they didn't catch the typo either, so it's kind of interesting. Article 7, this is the operating budget. Shall the district raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $72,283,299. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $71,466,384, which is the same as last year, were certain adjustments required by previous action of the district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. This is a majority vote required, recommended to be voted on by the school board and by the budget committee. The budget here that's before you is $1,615,000 higher than last year. It's a 2.29% increase, and you notice that this year the default is less by $816,000, so this budget is 1.13% over the default budget. And it's quite understandable that that would be true, given the fact of the rather large capital projects that we've run up against in this operating budget. It's challenging to get the default a little bit closer to the operating, with a $1 million roof, a $500,000 heat wheel, and a $428,000 track. All these projects need to get done, and they need to get done next year, so they're in here, and that is the reason why the default is $800,000 higher than the operating. If not for those, it would have been less.
Thank you. Ms. Guglielmi.
First what Andy said, you had it flipped, that the operating
No.
is higher than the default.
The default is higher than the operating, sorry.
The
No.
No,
operating-
the default is 816 less than
Yes.
the
There we go.
operating.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You're not used to saying that one.
I'm not. It's the
debits, credits,
first time in
you
a
know.
very long time, because of what I said. This is a unique year. It's a unique situation where you have the large capital improvement projects, and if not for that, then we would be like we are normally. The past I don't know how many years where the default has been less than the operating budget. Thank you.
The question I had it's a minor question, but I wondered if the $260 of the roof that's going to be lower than what we had originally settled on with our budget, if that's been subtracted from this final
No, it
number.
has not. It's a minor contingency, but you never know.
It's not
So
getting past me.
I didn't choose to subtract that because you never know.
So is there a motion? Mr. Schneider.
I move that we accept Article 7 for the operating budget as read.
And a second made by Ms. Guglielmi. Discussion. Do you want to speak to it first, or?
Well, just to reiterate that we've gone through this budget fairly carefully, and the fact that this year that the default is less than the operating budget does provide that option that we haven't done in the past. So.
Vice Chair Barnes.
Well, I think last meeting we had, we cut pretty darn close to $500,000 out of the budget. And we did that very cognizantly, knowing that any cuts above and beyond what we were about to make would have affected the quality of education that we've committed to give our students in this district. That being said, had you taken out the roof, take out $1.1 million, take out the track as $500,000, take out the heat wheels, another $500,000, and you have $2 million. And honestly, we are not a district that doesn't take care of our facilities and waits for it to rain inside. We're not going to let our roofs leak on our assets. And some of those assets are, of course, our children. The others are computers. And that being said, the heat wheel quality of, that's at dangerous levels of operation. It's rusting from the inside out. The track is something that's being used by our students, has safety issues that our manufacturer won't even support anymore. And above and beyond the students, who we could tell not to use it because they're our students, the community at large uses it quite frequently. And that's when we're not monitoring it. So that being said, it is a community asset that we are the stewards of as a school district. That's $2 million right there. Take that out, and we are under default by a considerable amount. We took out the $500,000 because we felt that we could bear it and still deliver the quality of education we've been hired to help the district deliver. And above and beyond that, what we would have done would have been irresponsible. So I'm proud of what we're putting forward. I wish we had a way of doing it for less. As a district and as a board, we have the responsibility to bring forth a responsible budget. I think we've done our best to do that. That being said, I think we have a year to learn about what maybe could be done in other districts, what is being done in other districts, where we are unique, where some of our costs may be unique. I think we've always talked about, we hear of private schools and charter schools and how they're doing it differently. We hear about other school districts in the surrounding areas, what they're doing differently. What makes theirs more expensive or less expensive than ours? And let's look at the anomalies and what the cost drivers are for those. And from there, maybe we'll come up with some areas where we can find deficiencies. But to do it without data would be doing it flagrantly and irresponsibly at this point. But I think we have the opportunity to learn as the year goes on. That's what we should be doing. We are in the space of education, so we should learn how to do our jobs better as a board, too. If that means learning where those numbers come from districts that have comparable demographic data to us, then we should do that. But at this point, with the information that we have, this is the most responsible budget we can bring forward.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Gualiumi.
I just wanted to say something about these capital projects as it relates to the question of maybe why we wouldn't put it on a warrant article, that it's in the operating budget.
Sure.
And I think my thoughts around that are it impacts the safety. We can't have a school without a roof on it. We cannot have an unsafe building for our students to be in. So that's a large reason, amongst others, of why I feel that it's in the operating budget. I don't know if anyone else has anything to say about that. But.
Thank you. I agree with you. Mr. Powell.
Yes, I'll absolutely add on to that. I agree. I believe that there was a question asked in the community in general as to why we would include the track in the operating budget. Why would we risk the budget being voted down because the track is in the budget? Well, the track is in the budget because, as has been said already, it needs to be replaced. There is no question about it. And I think that shows the board's commitment to the fact that we need to get this track replaced. That's why it's in the operating budget instead of putting it out for a special warrant article. Whereas if that track was put on a special warrant article and was voted down, that's it. We're done for the next year. It cannot be replaced because the voters have said, no, you cannot have it. This way, with it being in the operating budget, hopefully we won't have to, but there could be some flexibility if need be, and we can still maintain our commitment to get the roof replaced, the track replaced, the heat wheel replaced. So I think it's important that that everyone realizes that.
Thank you. Well said. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor say aye. That carries 5-0-0. And Mr. Marcus.
In favor.
Excellent. Thank you all. Great discussion. So these will go to the School Budget Committee now for consideration of the ones with money. And we will be discussing these at deliberative session on Tuesday, March 8th at James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School, and then ultimately vote on them on April 12th, 2016. And that will now take us to item number 9, Board's initial response to the presentation regarding drug awareness in the high school and community. At the board's last meeting, I was not here, but the board took in information from a panel, a wide panel of folks involved, both from our police department, as well as high school administration and Merrimack Safeguard. The purpose of the agenda item at that meeting was just that, to take in information. The board hasn't had an opportunity to discuss what was heard beyond the questions that were asked that evening, and so this agenda item is an opportunity for the board to process the information that was received. Is there any discussion of the information that was presented? Mr. Schneider.
So, in my tenure on the board, this is the second time that members of the high school and the police community have come to talk about drug and the situation at the schools. Unfortunately for me, the first time I wasn't here, I was out of town for that meeting, was right after I started on my first term. So for me, this was sort of the first time through being able to be in front of them. And I felt that we really needed to have this discussion afterwards because we took a lot of data in. We heard a lot of varying viewpoints. We heard from Councilor Rothaus under public participation. His viewpoint, there's been a lot of input from various inputs on both sides of using the drug sniffing dogs, both pro and cons. So there's a lot of, I'm going to use the word perception. There's a lot of perception of what the reality is at the high school and even at the middle school as far as the drug situation, alcohol situation. We heard a lot of that input. And, you know, at this point in time, as one member of the board, I'm struggling as to what the right answer is because I see the varying points of view. I see the talking about the relationship that's there at the schools where I heard Detective Murray talk about him not being exposed to dealing that's going on in schools. I did hear that and Principal Johnson's discussion, but I have also heard from other members of the community that their students say that they know where to find things in the school. So the bottom line for me is we started gathering data, but there needs to be additional data gathering and other steps that I think we as a board can work with the administration to take before we necessarily reach out and take a formal step around things like a drug sniffing dog. During the discussions, both Chief Doyle as well as Principal Johnson talked about opportunities for education, opportunities for sort of exposing proactively what the dogs can do as far as not only but drugs but other dimensions of that. Education around ramifications around drugs, both in terms of health as well in terms of impact on things like applying for financial aid or something along those lines. I also heard a lot about how some of the links that used to be on the district website, like Merrimack Safeguard, are no longer there. I went after the meeting and looked, and it's not there. So, I mean, there are some opportunities we have as a district to improve the linkages to some of these help things that were talked about. So I guess what I'd like to, in closing, I'd like to get some discussion going here and maybe work with administration to say, what can we do as far as educational opportunities, a plan, if you will, for the remainder of this year where we can do some education, do some proactive work on getting the information out there. and start the process, and then also bring back the same body that was there, get additional data, maybe after a quarter or whatever the right answer is, but make it much more ongoing, so that we can get information to either push the perception to reality that we all might have, and decide what steps we need to do. Because for me personally, I'm not ready yet to go to the step of bringing dogs into the schools, because there's too many questions I've got around what the right thing. So that's sort of how I wanted to start.
Vice Chair Barnes.
I just had a question on a comment you made, Andy, and that was that there were comments that you saw out there that parents are saying that their kids know where to find things. Has that information been shared with the district or the police department?
That's a good question.
Well, did you say you saw it?
No. If you look at some of the social media discussions that have gone on, parents comment that they talked to their child and found out that their child would be able to tell them where to find drugs and things in the school. Yeah, but that's anecdotal. It's not specific.
Oh, I understand,
And
but those parents had kids in the district, and that was why I asked the question. When I've seen stuff on Facebook that I thought the district would benefit in knowing, I took screenshots and sent it. So as the board, if we are seeing those kind of posts, I think it's beholden for us to let administration know what's being said out there, because they wouldn't go looking for that. If it's falling into our laps, I think we're responsible for saying, I know this information, I'd like to share it.
I understand that, but unfortunately, when we go to social media, just that I could extrapolate that my children might exaggerate the realities of what they can see at school. Are the parents doing the same thing? We don't know. It's social media. The reality's in there. We could. Maybe what we do is take an action that we report what we see in all those things. But to me, I really wanted us as a board to talk about proactive steps we could take through the formal things to make sure, because there's a perception out there that we need to get in front of through some of our actions. So that's the reason.
I would make this comment as well, that the board's job should not be scanning Facebook or other social media and reporting things to administration. I think that if a parent is concerned enough about a scenario, as this parent was, and has information from their child, that parent has a responsibility to take more action than putting a post on Facebook and making a general statement that this board and this administration begins to react to. They know who the principal is, they know the phone number, and if they're that concerned, I would hope that they would call. I understand what you're saying, but I really don't know that that's an official or an appropriate way to communicate a concern about what's going on with the student's education.
And I agree with you, but if I see that information, keeping it to myself doesn't seem responsible. And that was kind of my point. That, when I did see stuff, I sent it to Mark and Marge on past occasions. I may have copied you on some of them actually as well, because I want them to know what I'm seeing. I'm not going looking for it, but if it comes across my screen and I know it's information that might be of value to the district, I've sent it over.
I think what Mr. Schneider's saying is he didn't see it as specific enough to do that.
Just to close that thought out, on social media, there's a lot of emotion that's out there, a lot of pushing of things. Is there a bit of reality in what we see? Yes, but is it some actionable, something that would warrant it? I tend to not do that at this point, because if somebody does really care enough, like you described, to be able to say it's a problem, I would hope they would have talked to either district administration or the school administration. If I saw something, what I saw, I just felt was not reportable, because it was more conversation that was going on, and I heard that, it wasn't specific, so. Hearsay, yes.
Ms. Guagliumi.
So what I'd like to ask for is this. We review the curriculum frequently now. Every few months, there's an aspect of the curriculum that we're reviewing. I'd like to make a suggestion that the next piece of curriculum that we review would be the health curriculum. And as part of that, I'd like to know what aspects of education are going into this issue. what I foresee is that there is a group of people representative of various schools that are talking about this issue, and there's certain programs in place where it's being addressed. So I'd like to know what those programs are. I'd like to know what changes we've made recently or over the last couple of years, and what changes we might recommend going forward, specifically, maybe not necessarily within the whole scope of the health curriculum, but certainly around this topic. I'd like to get some thoughts on that, and I'd like to see what we're doing in a little more detail.
It's a great suggestion. Any other discussion? Mr. Powell.
I wanted to say that I agree with you 100%, Chris, regarding the fact that if a parent has specific information, it's beholden upon them to report that either to the district, either to the principal, either to the police department, instead of just throwing something out there on social media and saying, okay, I've done my job, that's it. We've also heard through social media or have seen through social media that Merrimack needs to get on board with other school districts who are using their respective police departments' K-9. The problem that I have with that is that we don't know what was happening in those districts that caused them to ask for that intervention. We don't know how Merrimack compares to that. I have to be honest with you, from what I heard from both the police department and the administration and Merrimack Safeguard, is nothing to tell me that, okay, this is something that would generate a request to the police department for their K-9 to go through the school. However, one thing that I did hear that I agree with is promoting education more so in the school, and the introduction of the K-9 unit, explaining what the dog can do, explaining what I'm sure that Officer Murray has, or Detective Murray rather, has a plethora of tools at his disposal to be able to use that unique relationship that he has with the high school students in getting his point across and doing education that way. And I think if anything comes out of what we heard at the last meeting, I think it's, let's get more education out there. Let's get more, and not just for the students, but for parents as well, the community at large. There could be an open forum or such that's presented at. And I'm just skimming my notes right here real quick. So those are my thoughts on the meeting last time.
Thank you. Mr. Marcus, you've had your hand up.
I agree that education is one of the primary and the largest way which the board should tackle this problem, because I spoke at the last meeting. I am strongly against the use of Gunny or any other police dog for that matter. And I also wanted to go back to what Mr. Johnson and Detective Murray had talked about. The one truly tangible result we have is the 3 instances where the students came to administration and told them about concerns they had for their friends who were abusing prescription drugs. And I think we should keep those events in mind as we discuss this issue further, because it's that relationship that administration has, and encouraging them to expound upon that and improve the services and outlets they offer to the students, which I'm sure they're always working to improve, but the board could not more vocally, but more directly support them in that improvement. So I believe that education and the administration's relationship with the student body are the 2 primary ways we should go about this. But then with regard to education about how Gunny can be used in the school, I don't feel like that should be part of that education. I feel like there are many ways which we do and which we already and which we can utilize to help students, or keep them informed, might not be the right word, but to enforce the idea. And I just believe that as soon as you bring up the topic of police dogs in the student mind, it is counterintuitive. And if we are all, as I understand it, most of us are hesitant to bring dogs into the school, so I feel that there's no benefit in saying, if we were to do this, this is what it could do, because then you're not explaining any practical solution that we, as of right now, want to implement. Instead, you're just putting that image in students' minds of police dogs sniffing through the lockers. So,
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Ms. Gualiumi had her hand up, and then I'll come to Vice Chair Barnes.
And I just had one more thought, I guess, maybe suggestion for the sake of brainstorming might be to increase our presence in Merrimack Safeguard. So perhaps 2 assignments, because there's differing opinions. I mean, there's people of different opinions that can bring that back to the board. So that was one other thought.
Okay.
Mark hasn't gone yet.
You. Okay. Dr. McLaughlin.
So it's appropriate, thank you, after Board Member Gualiumi made her comment. You know, I'm sure it's true that Merrimack Safeguard can do a better job of advertising its work. I think that's definitely true, and I'm sure as soon as this Thursday's meeting that we'll do that. But having said that, I'd point out that we haven't kept Merrimack Safeguard as an entity under a barrel. It's been a very public group for 6 years. And not unlike the parent support group, it is largely powered by a very small number of people. And the problem, whatever scope and size it is important enough that it be addressed by a community. And it exists and has existed. It meets the first Thursday of every month at St. James Church Hall at 6 o'clock. And we welcome and encourage any community member representing youth, parents, faith, medical, to come and to be a proactive part of the solution, because that is a group that has dedicated a lot of time and energy, disproportionate to the number of people who come, to helping Merrimack help Merrimack youth make positive choices. And so I just would offer that as a constructive way to help to continue to foster a positive, proactive dialogue. And so I would just encourage, there's plenty of room in the hall, and we have lots and lots of folding chairs, and we can unfold as many as we need. Right.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin. Vice Chair Barnes.
I just wanted to play off a couple of different comments that were made tonight. First, Jake. He was talking about not wanting to bring Gunny, but if the majority of the board has the desire to bring Gunny, I implore us that we only use him at an outside assembly by the track. I would hate to bring him into the school to introduce him. Bring him outside, have an outside assembly, so he's not coming through the halls with the expectation of what his training is there to do. So I would prefer he not come. I think we're not ready for that, but God forbid the majority of the board wants this. Don't introduce him into the halls, into the space in which he would be have the potential to someday investigate. Just because I think it's the wrong environment to set. The other thing about Safeguard is I was the rep for Safeguard until Andy could make one of his assignments and we switched. And one of the things I know we did quite often, and I'm not sure it has been done recently, and Trish helped me set it up. I know you were there in the back of the room. We were at the business expos. We gave brochures out, all the latest literature. We had Mac the Moose walking around, greeting children, coming over. We had a Plinko game and giveaways and handouts, and we were in a very good spot to engage people coming in. So everyone had to come by that booth to go anywhere at that business expo. Another space we had was 4th of July, and I also was manned that with, at the time, it was Jody Valancourt was the chair of Safeguard. And we were out there, again, doing Plinko and prizes, and people didn't realize the amount of work that goes into what that committee does and what information and skills that parents had available to them with the resources that Safeguard has compiled. So I think that visibility of that committee outside of those meetings is important, and there are events happening all the time in Merrimack that may warrant a good visibility. And again, you had that, there's like a 3-sided display, and it had all the different events, all the different outreaches, and of course they still do, I believe, the 4th of July float. But after the float's done, they're not less than participating in the midway. But again, touch points to the Merrimack family, the Merrimack user of their resources, I think is very important. So the website's one thing, but it's front of mind, I think, in engaging and addressing the questions and the concerns. And it was repetitive, the amount of questions they had. And there was a brochure for almost every question they did have available to them. They just didn't know where to look. So I think it's, what that committee does and what the school board and school district is involved with, there's a lot, of outreach that can be done on a very grassroots level as well. So, people really need to understand the resource that's there.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
So a couple things. First, in terms of Safeguard, we actually started talking about ways that we can do more outreach. I know at the meeting this week, we're going to talk about the AOK program, which is an attempt to start to reach out like this proactively into the community and do this. And we've also talked, both at this table as well as at Safeguard, about the funds from the grant that over time, the town will start to fund the school resource officer, which will leave funds over the next few years through the end of the grant that Merrimack Safeguard can use for outreach programs. So I think there's some real opportunities here that we can look at to be able to look at general education, not specifically at the high school or middle school, but more general in the community. Because, as was said, it could be a school problem, but it's really a community problem that we've got to worry about. And Merrimack Safeguard is the community, so we've got to do that. I will say, I heard Jake talk about not wanting the dog at all. I heard Shannon talk about not having it in the school. I'll be perfectly honest that one of the things we need to do as education is the reality of what goes on. Because in my mind, while I'm not ready to start searching the schools yet because of lack of evidence, if the evidence pointed that I'm not against using that as a tool should we get to that point. However, I also don't want to sort of pussyfoot around keeping gunning only outside. Like if let's say they're going to use the cafeteria to be able to do a demonstration, for example, we decide to do that. If he's going to walk in a door and walk 3 feet down to the cafeteria, I wouldn't be against that. I mean, I know that there's a concern that not having him in the school to create the perception that he's going to sniff lockers. I mean, but the reality is that if he's walking down the street and he sniffs something, he's going to react. And people need to understand that that's part of the way he is, even if he's not out doing something explicit for this program. So I'd want it to be discussed between the school district administration, ourselves, as well as the police department, what the right approach for education is, what they've done in other places, what the scenario is. Because I want to make sure whatever education is done is effective. And then the other part, and my last comment is, it's got to be timely because, Cinda talked about bringing up the curriculum for health as part of that. I think that whatever the district does, at least initially, we're coming up into a time of year when, I was going to say thawing out, but we haven't really frozen enough to thaw out yet this winter. But you're heading into time where kids, where there's events that are going to start. You've got prom happening, where you've got the mock DUI event that's out there. It's a really great time of year to start some education around drugs as well as alcohol and things like that. So I'd really like to see some sort of an action occur. Could be with the curriculum, it could be outside of it, to take opportunity through the spring as kids go into the summer to at least make some level of headway to help start with the problem. And it could be an iterative step, sort of being pragmatic about approaching it, but I'd like us to do something, recommend or see the district do something in the near term, even if it's not full-blown yet. So,
thank you. Any other comments? I haven't shared my thoughts yet. Mr. Marcus.
I just wanted to say that with regard both to Mr. Schneider and Ms. Barnes' points, I don't think that personally, I feel like the distinction between inside and outside the school is negligible. My thought was more along the lines of, like, if we're bringing him in, I don't feel like there's any difference between the football field and the calf, like you said. I just think that he shouldn't be brought in at all, even for educational purposes, because just the concept of the dog does more harm than it does good. So I don't believe it has to do with physical location or time of the year, or the only thing that matters is the dog itself. And you mentioned reality, and I wanted to express the reality that even if, I know this isn't 100% on topic, but I'm just worried that I don't know how long we're going to discuss this, so I want to get all my feelings out while I am still a member of the Merrimack student body. But drugs that are in the school aren't being kept in lockers, and they're not being kept in loose bags. I can say that with not absolute definity. I don't know if that's a word.
We'll take it.
Okay.
We know what you mean.
But just my understanding of not only common sense among students, but then also those related things with which I am familiar. So I can tell you that in the future, when we do discuss dogs being brought in, I had said last meeting it would only move the problem from the lockers to the backpacks, but I don't even think the lockers are the house of the problem right now. So again, I believe that even bringing him in for educational purposes would do a lot to undermine the outlets which administration builds. And even if we brought him in for education, or if we brought him in to search the school, it wouldn't yield any positive effects with regards to building ties between administration and the student body, or finding actual drugs. Without violating students' basic rights of privacy, that is.
Thank you. Excellent discussion. Yeah, we're out of time. I don't know how long we're going to talk about this, or whether I'll get something to say.
The clock stopped working up there, so.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Thank you. That's interesting. If it starts going backwards, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So, like Mr. Schneider, I have attended one of these discussions in person, the last one probably 4 years ago, and unfortunately was not at the last meeting, but thanks to Merrimack TV and Ms. DiNucci's wonderful minutes, I was able to catch up on the discussion. My takeaway from that is really twofold. First off, I like a lot of the ideas that were discussed here. In terms of what was discussed, the police chief said the role of Gunny is not for enforcement, but to show a zero tolerance, right? That we're setting a tone. And I think there's a tone that's set. Jake talks about the climate at the high school and that it's very important, and I see that as very important. My takeaway was that there's additional data that I really want to see. We have the benefit of not going first here. There are other school districts who have tried this. Some may have had success. We don't know what the details behind their situation are, and there are other districts who may have tried it and abandoned it for one reason or another. I would like to hear from other superintendents in the area who've explored this and gone further to hear what their experience is. I like the idea of reviewing the health curriculum to look at what can we do to further educate on the topic. I think that's wonderful, and maybe it's not just the health curriculum. I know, Ms. Gualiumi, you and I attended a safeguard presentation that was directed at parents that I actually think would be very useful if students saw it. It was from a law enforcement officer whose role is in identifying people who are on a substance. And the various effects of those substances on the body and what the outward signs are, et cetera. That would be an excellent presentation for students, I think, before Gunny even. And so my feeling is I would much rather review our approach to this, take in data, and make an informed decision about how we further educate kids before we bring in a dog. Ms. Guagliumi.
There's one more piece I think that we would want to look at, and that is what support are we offering for our parents?
Right.
You know, as you had mentioned, that was a very informative and interesting seminar, but I think offering, you know, what are we doing right now and what could we be doing differently that provides parents not only a way to be able to network, but as well tools and places to go and what to look for, some things like that. So
Yeah.
Maybe we're doing some of that, maybe we're not, maybe we need to be doing more of it. That would be another piece of data that I'd like to look at.
Wonderful. So I think we've got some items that we can follow up on as it relates to details related to curriculum, related to other districts' use, et cetera. So I would say more to come. Odds are you'll continue to get a chance to voice an opinion, as this will probably be on a subsequent agenda. Does that make sense? Is that good with the board? Okay. Excellent. So we'll move on then. Thank you. And that will take us to item number 10, second review of new policy. Superintendent Chaffrey to review the policy on video and audio recording in school classrooms.
So I think how I want to begin tonight is to talk to you about what has happened since the last time we were together, I believe on January 18th, and to highlight that this is probably one of the more difficult policies I put before you, because as I engage with others, what I find is rather than having answers to questions, I have more questions or questions to questions. So what I want to do is we've got it going forward, and I think it's important to have some policy in place. However, I'm going to start backwards, and by that I mean that today Matt and I went to a legislative workshop that was sponsored by our association, New Hampshire School Administrators Association. And at that meeting was Senator Stiles and Representative Ladd. Each of them oversees their respective education committee. So Senator Stiles for the Senate Education Committee and Representative Ladd for the House Education Committee. And so what we did is we marched through all of the bills that they're dealing with, either that have been renewed or are new. And what I want you to know is that there is a House bill being put forward. Its number is 1372. It has sponsorship by 8 representatives and 2 senators. And what it seeks to do is to clarify this specific legislation that passed last session that limited video and audio recording in school classrooms, and that has created, if you will, almost a maelstrom, meaning they realized that what they put in place maybe didn't get quite at what they wanted to do, and so what they're trying to do is to undo it or redo it. So what it says is that the particular bill that's being put forward would amend the original to allow the use of audio and video recordings in classrooms if part of a student's IEP, and it clarifies that recordings are not to be used specifically for teacher evaluations without board approval after a hearing and parental notification. And it goes further to say, it inserts this language, quote, "Nothing in this section shall preclude the use of audio or video recordings for student instructional purposes," which just opens it up to do the kinds of things that we would hope we would be able to do. And that this really came about to protect teachers, if you will, to not have someone go and record their instruction and then archive it and pull it out at another time or whatever and have it something to do with their evaluation. That is what the legislators were initially introducing. And you can see off of it, it is precluding us from going forward to use it as a tool in a number of ways. So that's what's being proffered, if you will. And what I would say in talking to our executive director, Mark Joyce, who works with the legislature all the time, he feels that there is no doubt that this will be passed. So that coming forward, that would be in June by the time it goes through also the Senate. So the thing is, yes, I think we should go forward. However, there are going to be a lot of things that I'm not going to be able to answer specifically. Or what I think is, between now and June, it's going to be very limited, a policy that's very limited, and then perhaps open up in the year 16, 17. So I wanted to start with that because I looked at that as a positive off our meeting today. I felt much better. Now I'm going to back up to Thursday night. Thursday night, and I'm sure Vice Chair Barnes will refer to this in her committee reports, we met with the district parent group. And I put this forward because that's a good sampler. These are volunteer coordinators, presidents of their respective parent groups, and so on. And immediately upon looking at it, the first thing they did is start asking questions, which I don't have answers to at all. And one of the persons in the room is a student teacher in another district who would love to have, because she's going down the educational path, she would love to be videotaped so that she could see her own teaching and be able to critique it. And in this other district and so on, she's been precluded from doing that. So she talked about the frustration of how hard this is. So it not only gave us testimony, but it also raised questions, and all I did was copying down furiously the questions they have. Likewise, the leadership team, when we've been going through it, more questions have been raised up. And so basically, Barrett, Christina, and I have to have a longer session than we've had thus far. What I will tell you is this. There were two questions that were raised the last time. If I don't repeat your question, it means I don't have the answer yet. But there were two. One by Board Member Guayumi, and she asked, if you look at the policy, you know it's divided for the public. It's divided into two parts. Part A is what you're not going to be able to do without written parent consent, and it's called an opt-in policy, meaning you can't be assumptive about anything. You must have a written response from every parent. And Part B talks about the circumstances under which you would be able to do videotaping or audio taping. So a question in B2 is asked about the yearbook. Why would a yearbook be listed? And the answer is there are some school districts that use video yearbooks. They do not have a print yearbook. They have a video yearbook. So that would be there because that's a composite of a lot of different kinds of things, but it doesn't have to do with instruction. And then Student Representative Marcus raised up about presentations under B2 as well. And even in our own district, elementary principals talked in some of the happenings that go on in their buildings, such as town meeting. Town meeting occurs at Reeds Ferry, where students stand up and do different kinds of presentations, as well as the Battle of the Books, and they began to name those kinds of things where students do presentation. That wouldn't be about instruction. That is about, the student just standing up and delivering or applying, I suppose, what one has learned. So that answered the reason about why we would want to keep those, I think, in our policy. Not that we do a video yearbook, but if we chose to go in that direction, it would be there. I think it is not about the circumstances under which written consent is not required. It's everything under A and what is not doable. Those are things that I still have to probe further with not only Attorney Christina, who is, as you know, the attorney for the School Boards Association, but also our own attorney, too. And what I will also tell you, if you've got the Council of School Attorneys all together, and they number like 40, I'm going to tell you on this policy, there'd be some difference of opinion. So I intend to just keep going forward. I thought that sharing with you what I've learned thus far would be important, especially given this morning. However, I am not ready yet to put this anywhere near consent. So my hope would be to come back to you on the 15th of February with some more answers to questions, including the public hearing. What I want to find out is if we went forward and did a public hearing connected to a school board meeting like we do gifts and grants that are over 5,000 and put it just as a space before with proper notification, would that be acceptable as compared to doing anything other than that? And so that might not happen till March. But just so you know, I'm still working on it.
Mr. Schneider.
So just a pragmatic question, I guess. So this law has been in effect since last summer, I believe,
Yeah,
and we're just
like 60 days after the fact.
right, but it's been for a while, and we're now looking at the policy, and we're talking about a potential run out to be going to a hearing in March, but yet potentially in the May-June timeframe, it's possible that there might be a House bill that gets voted on that changes the process. So my pragmatic question is, if we table this policy until we know the clarity of any changes and then visit it, are we any worse for where we are today?
I would ask the superintendent who brought this forward and saw the need for
Right,
it.
and I brought it forward because the administration at my weekly leadership team meetings was asking about it because there would be an educator who would want to go forward and do some recording or whatever, and or they would have a student teacher, and they would at least want to explore the possibility. So remember, if you don't get parent acceptance, you're not going to do it anyway, but this at least provides guidance. So if I hadn't had those queries, Andy, I probably would have just said, you know what, why don't we table it, and so on. Because, like I say, I go to get questions answered, and there are more questions to questions. So at a minimum, what I would like to do, off what I learned this morning, is at least to consult with Attorney Christina and Attorney Peel to ask, what do they think is best to do? I mean, to just make a blanket statement, do not do anything. I mean, I could still say, if you choose to do that, you must get written consent, and they could just do that as a matter of course. To table it or to go forward and at least have something for people to refer to. I think that might be a better course of action.
Mr. Powell, then Vice Chair Barnes.
I had also asked the question last time about students using their smartphones in the class.
And I didn't have an answer. That's why you didn't get it.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was still in there.
It's on my list.
Perfect, thanks.
Vice Chair Barnes.
I just to follow up Andy, after he finishes doing his film or his vlog. But Barrett at our NHSBA Delegate Assembly was very specific in his presentation to say, do a policy now if you haven't done already because it's already late. The other thing he said was, we know what, and he alluded to, and I gave Marge my packet on that. We know there's going to be some changes to this, but nothing ever gets voted in the way it was written. So to take that under advisement would be ill-advised and short-sighted. So do something now so you're compliant. Correct it later when it's out of compliance, as you should always do with your policies. So he was very adamant to say that if you haven't done it, get on it. And or else you're really not addressing a law on the books. So that was his strong advice to the Delegate Assembly.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Actually, I'm glad Mr. Powell had raised that question because my reading of the policy was that it is vague in terms of who the policy covers. Is it educators, parents, students, et cetera? It just simply talks about consent. So that would be great to get that answer. Thank you very much. That will take us to item number 11, correspondence. Any correspondence to come before the board? Mr. Powell.
I had received one email from a constituent asking for my take on the presentation that Chief Doyle and the high school gave last week.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
Ditto.
Ms. Guglielmi.
Times 3. Yeah.
Okay. Vice Chair Barnes.
Don't call me.
I got a phone call. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Barnes.
Sorry.
I wasn't even at the meeting.
Well, then.
And additionally, I think I shared with you a letter that was received from Senator Ayotte in response to our copying her on our letters to FERC related to Kinder Morgan, thanking us for the letter, expressing what she has done and her opposition to the pipeline. And then additionally, within our packets, we all received a piece of correspondence from a parent related to the academic calendar and how that interacts with school athletic schedules and midterms, and the fact that our schedule puts students at a disadvantage because in some cases they have multiple games in weeks when we're taking tests, when the NHIAA is scheduling around other districts who have their midterms perhaps in a different week. Any other correspondence to come before the board? Okay, seeing none. Comments? Any comments? Seeing none, we'll move to new business. Any new business to come before the board? All right, which will take us now to committee reports. Any committee reports? We'll start at the end and we'll work back. Mr. Marcus.
I just wanted to let the board know it's relatively inconsequential, but this past Saturday, the Merrimack High School Granite State Challenge team placed second. Kim was there in the student section, one of the largest in the state, and they played.
You're not saying Kim was one of the largest students in the state, are you?
Of course.
No.
One of the largest student sections in the state. But
that's my daughter. I can say.
They placed second
large.
in the state. They ended up losing in the Super Challenge to Nashua South, I believe, one of the Nashua schools. But Mr. Johnson was there. The coach is Dr. Campbell, and this is one of the clubs whose funding has been increased this year as per Mr. Johnson and the board's co-curricular funding. So the money's being put to good use.
It's great news. Very exciting for them. Thank you for the update. I have to apologize to my daughter now when I go home.
Waiting for you to do that.
She's not watching, trust me. Committee reports. Ms. Guglielmi.
So at a Parks and Rec meeting last week, one of the items that came up was that a couple of the parent groups of the schools are putting together a color run at Wasserman Park. So I understand that went in front of town council, and I believe it was approved.
800.
Was it?
It was approved 800.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to let you know that the idea is to mingle schools before they move to the upper elementary and to create a fun, safe community event as well.
That's great.
It received unanimous support at Parks and Rec as well.
Wonderful. Mr. Schneider.
800, that was...
Vote early, vote often.
Yeah, vote early, vote often. A week ago on Monday, whatever last Monday was, had a meeting with the Planning and Building Committee. We talked through Planning and Building hadn't met since probably before we did our budget discussion. So I spent time bringing them sort of up to speed on what we discussed, sort of what the Planning and Building Committees, or what the Planning Board's recommendation for CIP and sort of what the board's response was. We talked a bit about our joint meeting and how we talked about the potential disposition, ultimately, of the land that's on O'Gara Drive. And while I didn't give them a charge, because we haven't given them a charge, I said one of the things they might want to consider looking at is, thinking about is the land that's there, because in a couple of years when the lease is up, it's possible that could be released. So one of the things that they did, just as a icebreaker, is there was a debate at the table as to whether the land that the SAU sped buildings proposed on was larger than the land that the district owns in that corner. So this is a quiz you can think. What do you think is larger, where the skate park area is with the rink, or where the SAU sped building is going to go, or plan to go? Any guess?
You're asking me?
Does it include the sand dunes?
No. So the answer is that
Thank you.
that's a rhetorical question. The land where the SAU sped building is approximately 1 acre. The proposal is, and the land up where the skate park is, if you measure it to what the property where it owns behind the building, it's 3 acres. So it's sort of sneaky as to how much land there is up there, but there is a fair amount. So the Planning and Building Committee, the board, when that does occur in a couple of years, there's some land that we have, choices and decisions to make. But anyway, so that was sort of the discussion. I notified them that the track was going to go into the operating budget, so there's not really any action for them to do on that one, and so that's sort of where we left it. So they're paying attention to what's going on with the budget and things like that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Powell.
Speaking of budget, the Budget Committee met on the 19th and the 26th. On the 19th, the elementary schools, the upper L, the middle, the high school, and special services presented their budget and fielded questions, of which there were none. And there was also a presentation done by Director Fabrizio and Assistant Principal Julie DeLuca on mental health expenses to give the Budget Committee an idea of what that subcommittee is looking at. On the 26th, we heard from food service, library and media, maintenance, and the district-wide. There was quite a robust discussion at both the maintenance and the district-wide level. So it'll be interesting to see what tomorrow night's meeting brings up, because there was a large discussion around the roof at the middle school. Knowing this new information, I think it's resolved itself.
Thank you. Vice Chair Barnes.
The New Hampshire School Boards Association Executive Committee met to discuss the transition with the retirement of the regulatory director and how that role may be done in the future. And also started planning for the March board meeting, which is where we meet with the congressional delegation. This is an important one, which is why I'm bringing it up. Last year when they came, I met with Mark and Marge, and we'll plan to do the same, to talk about how federal regulations affect local school district policy and operation. So, of course, with ESSA coming up, replacing No Child Left Behind, I think it's going to be a huge topic of conversation from them, and I think we have a lot of questions, or how it may change how we strategize, how we do our assessments, things like that. But, what federal regulations are going to come down, or are down, and how they're affecting us. So I'll be meeting with Mark and Marge in the next few weeks to go over that right after the deliberative session, and we'll be ready for them to come again. And then on the 19th, that was the 25th, on the 19th, Greater Woods met. We're prioritizing 2016 projects, and with the approval of funding for the bridge in Greater Woods that will benefit our school students, it's affecting the prioritization of our projects. So that's definitely going to be something we're doing as soon as feasible, and I will let you know when a date is set. And of course, it's always weather permitting. So there's always that caveat. Finally, the district parent group met on the 28th. The color run was also mentioned there because Jeanne Cruz, who I believe works for Parks and Rec, is also the Thornton's Ferry rep, and left quickly after her presentation to go to the town council to get approval. So that was also discussed there. The new policy, as Marge mentioned earlier, was reviewed, and any parents that had any feedback were to send them over to Marge or attend the public hearing if they're available, based on their experience and knowledge of district operations and students. And finally, Julie DeLuca was making the rounds with us too on the district mental health committee and all that they are looking to do, including strategies for getting data to help to better effectively address mental health issues in our school district. So it was a very robust night. So 3 reports and I'm done.
Great, thank you. And I actually have one. Last Wednesday, the 27th, I attended in Board Member Schneider's absence meeting of CERESC Board, where the audit had been completed and there was a review of financials at the meeting. No actions.
Do we get $1 million back?
I'm sorry?
Do we get $1 million back?
No money. No soup for you. That will take us to item number 14, public comments on agenda items. We have one person, one of our favorites, from whom we've already heard.
I know. On a different topic this time.
Wonderful.
Different hat, different topic. Tricia Swanger, still, 6 Clara Drive. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the discussion about bringing Gunny into the school. One of the other hats I wear is I am a member of Safeguard. And there's a couple of things that really concern me about this. First is, I know there was discussion about perception. Well, when we're in Safeguard, we talk a lot about perception and relationships and trust and working together. And my fear is that if you do bring Gunny into the school, you are doing serious damage to everything that's been built over the past decade. And that's not something we want to do. It's taken a long time to build that relationship and build that trust. And we have a better relationship with our students because of that. We want our relationship to be one that is of guidance and teaching and working together. And I'm afraid that if we do something like bring Gunny into the schools, that sets up a much more adversarial relationship. And I don't think that's where we want to go as a district, unless we have to. Okay, so that's the first point. The second is perception in the community. By bringing Gunny into the schools, believe me, if you think there was talk on social media because of an incident or two, if there is a drug-sniffing dog in school, that's going to be nothing compared to what you're going to see on social media, because that will create a perception. No matter what the reason is, that will create a perception that if there is a drug-sniffing dog in the school, there must be a serious problem, and they must really need that. So, again, before you go down that path, you need to be very certain what your goal is, that it's needed, and that you have a very specific purpose in mind, and that you educate everyone in the school and the community well before it's done. Now, that being said, I'm also on Safeguard, and we have been working diligently to build relationships in the community and reaching out and in the school. And one thing you forgot to mention, Shannon, was Safeguard members also go to the orientations and have handouts and informational presentations that can be done in the schools. And much of the education that's currently done in the high school and the middle school, I'm sure Jake is aware of this, happens in the health class. I know my daughter can educate me on what the signs of drug use are and what the signs of depression are and all of that. So I think the school in general, at least on a base level, is doing a fantastic job educating. It's getting that word out and that community relationship building. So I look forward to whoever would like to come Thursday. We'll be there. And I just caution you that I'm really concerned with the dynamic that this would set up, not only with our students, but with our community. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else looking to address the board under public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comments, take a moment to sign the manifest, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn made by Mr. Powell, seconded by Vice Chair Barnes. All those in favor say aye. Passes 5-0-0. Mr. Marcus, one last final opinion.
In favor.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Good night.